Yeah, I'm surprisingly emotional.
I mean, it's been 10
I
years.
think it's the late night I had with the trying to get through that border. Now that was not tolerant.
Are you aware that people might disagree with your opinion? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Are you afraid of being wrong?
No, I'm often wrong.
What is your favorite book?
Lord of the Rings.
Your favorite song?
The Tree, sung by a Canadian rock band called Rush.
Your favorite Bible verse?
Psalm 139 is something which encapsulates for me how intimately God knows us. It starts off by saying God knows everything about us even before we speak. Even in the darkness, He can see us. He knew everything about us even when we were being conceived in the womb. So it's an incredibly intimate psalm. But it ends with a challenge to invite the God who knows us so intimately to provoke us and to explore us and challenge us to be better. And I love the psalm.
If you were allowed to do one crime and not be punished for it, what would it be?
I would like to be a kind of Robin Hood and sort of commit the crime of robbing a massive private equity fund and distributing the money to the refugees. Well, I've been here in Abu Dhabi for 10 years. It's been our home. It's been a place where our children have grown up, gone to school, made friends. It's been a place where I have been in one community for the longest period of my life. I've never lived anywhere else as long as I have lived in Abu Dhabi. What I feel about leaving Abu Dhabi is my overwhelming emotion is gratitude. I'm really thankful for the opportunity. There's been a real sense of grace and favour. There's been a real sense of being carried in prayer. There's been difficult times and sometimes unpleasant times. Overall, they're eclipsed by this sense of wonder of what God has done through and in the life of St Andrew's Church. So I'm going to go away with a bucket load of fantastic memories, extraordinary experiences, and above all, lots of friendships with people from all over the world. I suppose the most surreal moment I had was sitting on the front row of the papal mass along with 180,000 worshippers when Pope Francis came to Abu Dhabi at the beginning of 2019. We were in a football stadium with unquestionably the biggest Christian worship event in the history of the Arabian Peninsula, the entire Arabian Peninsula, and I was on the front row for it. The memories of that service are just overwhelming. I cried through most of it because I have lived in the Middle East for 30 years. In Islamic countries ranging from Egypt to Jordan to Yemen to Kuwait, I never thought I would see something like that. The worship was amazing. Pope Francis rocks. Again, it's just been an extraordinary journey looking at how an Islamic nation is wholeheartedly embracing the concept of tolerance. And that challenges me as a Westerner because the perception of the Middle East for people back in the West is that it's very difficult to be a Christian here, that Islamic countries are very controlled and restricted and there's not a lot of religious freedom. So to experience an Islamic nation who not only permits the church to exist, but actively promotes it, it's just been an incredible experience. And they have elevated the position of religious leaders as key partners in the enterprise of promoting tolerance. So I've actually been part of a government platform which is promoting values and beliefs which we all believe in, which is respect for neighbour, and I've been privileged to travel the world with the government promoting that message. So I've just had this extraordinary experience of representing Christians in the United Arab Emirates in places like the House of Lords in London, European Parliament, the Parliament of Denmark, going to the Vatican to meet the Pope. So I travelled the world really, speaking at the G20 Interfaith Summit in Australia. So I have all of those kind of memories working alongside Emiratis, and we travel as a group, we build really good friendships. So and then there's the books, Celebrating Tolerance. I'm surprisingly emotional.
I mean, it's been 10 years.
I think it's the late night I had with the trying to get through that border. Now that was not tolerant. I think where else would I ever have an experience like that? So, and what's really interesting for me is watching how they have invested in a theology, an Islamic theology that embraces pluralism. Traditionally, Islamic theology says there's the house of Islam and then there's the house of ignorance, and everybody who's not a Muslim is outside of it, and that's it. But this government has invested in a theology which has gone right back to the origins of Islam to try and understand how they can justify having Jews, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, all living in their society. And they've gone right back to the time when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, travelled to Medina, and he created a constitution which, for some people, they see it as like the first sort of pluralist document where he lays down very clear conditions on how Christians and Jews could relate to the Muslim community. Right at the very beginning, there's a sense that he embraced pluralism. And the Islamic world has by and large forgotten that. So what this government has done is they've taken that tradition and they've made it front and centre of their theology and said if that's what the Prophet was like, that's what we need to be like. But my experience of churches in the United Arab Emirates is we all tend to live in cultural bubbles. We're a pretty isolated community and a lot of that is for understandable reasons. But you come to a strange and foreign country and you want to try and recreate a sense of home from home. So if you're from Tamil Nadu, you will want to go to a church that looks like a church in Tamil Nadu. So linguistically, culturally, you find yourself in this familiar cultural bubble where you feel at home. And so we have many, many churches who are just doing that. They're recreating home by maintaining the traditions of the home church, celebrating the languages which they worship. So whether you're Korean or Pakistani or Indian or Brazilian, we have a Brazilian group here. There's this real sense of our main mission is to create a bubble where we feel safe, where we can make sense of the world around us. But the ethic of tolerance is challenging us to move out of that comfort zone. And so the invitation from this government is, yes, we are a community of communities, but we really would like you to move out your comfort zone and get to know each other better and be prepared to take risks. How many expats here spend years and years in the United Arab Emirates and don't have a single Emirati friend? And the Emiratis likewise are living in their own cultural bubble too, and so it's upon us all really to take the steps of friendship and sort of pushing through those bubbles, extending the hand of fellowship, having meals together, and just getting to know one another as people. People say, what's the secret? How do you get good at doing interfaith? The answer is incredibly and banally simple. It is having a meal. Invite somebody to a dinner or lunch, or just go out together, and that's where the best interfaith interaction take place. Food. And that explains why I'm fat.
It's a good thing then.
Oh, it's a great thing. One of the things I've learned over the years is to cultivate what one person has called holy envy, which is to look for that which is really good in the cultures and religions of other people. It seems our default position, especially as Christians, is to look for the negative in the other and compare our best with their worst. And that really is not what tolerance is about. I think God delights in diversity, and we forget that. We feel, as humans, we feel threatened by diversity. There's a very common practice which sociologists call othering. We talk about us and them. That's a very damaging way of looking at the world. And if we have a theology of us and them, we are saved, they are not. We are Pentecostal, they are not. We speak Hindi and they do not. And somehow feel that makes us more superior or more elite or just a better group of people, then we're in trouble. Humility demands that we recognize God is beyond our human comprehension, that we are limited by our own words and our cultural view of the world. And God transcends all of that. God transcends all languages, all time, all cultures. And that means we should seek to learn what God is like through the diversity of the world we live in. I always think of the Tower of Babel story. Some people read that to see God being mean. Everybody was building this incredible tower up to the heavens, and it was going to be a great accomplishment. But what they forget, and I think one reason why God was so angry about it, was to build a tower like that, they used slaves. To build a tower like that, there is an elite group domineering the others and making them doing all the work. To build a tower like that, there is one group whose language and culture is prevailing over others. So when God stops that, and when he introduces all these different languages, all this babbling, I think he did that because he wants the world to be a place of diversity. He wants humans to be incredibly creative in how we express language and thoughts and art. And he doesn't want one group to build an empire at the expense of others. We should welcome the fact we have so many different traditions and rather seeking to condemn them, seek to understand them. Of course we can disagree with one another and say, well, I wouldn't do that, or I don't believe in that, but not at the expense of condemnation. Because the other favourite Bible verse I have is, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And that's a really important Bible verse because the church too often condemns itself and other Christians. No othering, no empire, no condemnation. When I was a relatively new Christian and grown up, I had something like 10 pages of doctrinal statements I was prepared to die for. It's now reduced over the years down to 3 sentences. And those 3 sentences for me sort of capture the nub of what's really important for me as a Christian, or what makes Christians Christians. And it's actually a phrase from the Anglican liturgy, which we say as part of the Holy Communion service. And it's simply this: Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. That really for me just sums up everything in a nutshell. That I'm prepared to die for. I think we commit a crime really when we reduce worship down to the kind of songs we sing. The word worship means to give worth, and when we try to honour God, we try to give him worth. And I think singing a song, whether it's an old hymn or whether it's a modern rock and roll contemporary song, is not what worship is about. So for me, worship is a lifestyle. Worship is an attitude. Worship is how we walk with God day by day, which extends way beyond the service. People do get very uptight about music, which is usually what Christians mean when we talk about worship. And I want to say, guys, we've got to think bigger than that. If our lives are not reflecting that God is worthy, if we are mean and petty in our attitude, and as 1 Corinthians says, though I might sing the songs of angels and have no love, then it's worth nothing. I think one of my favourite songs actually was written by Matt Redman, called When the Music Fades. And it was written at a time when his church was going through a lot of conflict, ironically over music. And so the vicar at the time just stopped all the music. He said, we've made worship about music, and it's not. It's about God, it's about the Lord, it's about expressing His worth. And so he wrote that song, When the Music Fades, after the vicar allowed music back. And there's a line in it, we've made it all about ourselves, but it's all about you, it's all about you. For Christians, I would say, remember what it's about. It's not about the music. When the music fades, it's about Jesus. I would say to the youth that faith is a marathon. It's a lifetime journey. When you become a child of God, it's like joining a new family. And family can be enormously irritating at times. There's lots of bumping of heads and there's lots of misunderstanding. Just allow yourself patience to grow. Just to remember that you're part of this family now for life. And that means having a long view. And it's not about the exciting experiences in the short term, but it's about belonging to a family, going through all the challenges that poses, but knowing that nothing will change your adopted surname, which is beloved, child of God, adopted into the family of heaven. My message to the world is simply this: we have the resources that everyone can live a life that is well resourced in terms of food, in terms of security, and to challenge the world to find out how we can share those resources equitably so everyone can join in.